This implies that L2 learners are sensitive to the discourse conditions that govern the syntactic derivation of WH topicalization. Okay, now next let's come to the unaccusative ergative distinction. According to the unaccusative hypothesis, intransitive verbs can be divided into two types, unaccusative verbs and ergative verbs. Unaccusativity and ergativity are syntactically represented and semantically determined. On the one hand, they are semantically predictable. On the other hand, they are syntactically encoded. In other words, they form a syntax-semantics interface. So the main difference between the two types of intransitive verbs lies in the position of the argument at LF. An ergative verb has an external argument, but no internal argument, whereas an unaccusative verb has an internal argument, but no external one. So, unaccusative verbs in Chinese and English behave differently at PF, phonetic form. In English, the internal argument of an unaccusative verb raises to the subject position obligatorily. In Chinese, it can remain in the subject position at PF as long as it is indefinite. So for example, the argument of the unaccusative verb break in English can't stay in the object position at the PF and must occur at the subject position. So Abbas broke. In contrast, the indefinite NP argument of the verb sui, so change of state is an unaccusative verb, in Chinese can stay in the object position. So we can say it can raise to the subject position, 花瓶碎了, but we can also say 碎了一个花瓶, that's okay. It can remain in the object position as long as it is indefinite. So several experiments were conducted to examine whether L2 Chinese learners are sensitive to the unaccusative ergative distinction. Yuan's study focused on the position of the argument in the two types of verbs to see whether English-speaking learners' L2 syntax of Chinese allows the single argument of the unaccusative verb, but disallow the single argument of the unergative verb. So participants include 4 L2 groups and 1 control group, and the instruments include an oral picture description task and a sentence acceptability judgment test. So results show that beginning learners of Chinese consistently reject or tend to reject all sentences with the argument in post-verbal position, including the correct Chinese sentences. So in the 3 sentences here, sentence A and B make a contrast. 断 is an unaccusative indicating change of state. When the internal argument is indefinite, it can stay in the object position as shown in A. 这条马路上断了一根电线 is indefinite, so it can stay in the object position. When it is definite, it must raise to the subject position and can't stay in situ. So you can't say 这条马路上断了那根电线. So this is definite effect. So in this case, 那条电线 must raise to the subject position. It can't stay in the object position. Sentence C, the verb 跳 jumped is not an unaccusative verb but an ergative verb, and its argument is external. So the NP, 一个孩子 must raise to the subject position, though it is indefinite. So only the indefinite NP of unaccusative verbs can stay in the object position. So beginning learners reject or tend to reject all the sentences where the argument occurs in the object position, no matter whether it is correct or not. So all the 3 sentences are disallowed in the interlanguage. Yuan's study also found that L2 Chinese grammars develop gradually as L2 learners' Chinese proficiency is increasing, so that the very advanced learners are able to make a clear distinction between the two types of intransitive verb. So an implication is that syntax, semantics interface is not a problem to English-speaking learners L2 Chinese grammar. The similar experiment was conducted by Shan in 2006. He made a further study of the unaccusative and ergative distinction using the same instrument, acceptability judgment test. The findings are that the subtle distinction between the two types of verb is acquired very late, and that only near-native learners are sensitive to the distinction in L2 Chinese. This conclusion supported Yuan's findings. So the two empirical studies reported above suggest that the syntax-semantics interface concerning unaccusative and unnegative verbs is acquirable, though very late. The conclusion contradicts the original version of the interface hypothesis, but in agreement with the recent version. And we know that in the original version, that all the interfaces are unacquirable. And in the recent version, only external interfaces are unacquirable and the internal ones are okay. Okay, now let's come to next phenomenon, that is overt and null elements in Chinese, which concern both an internal interface and an external interface. So Chinese allows both null elements and overt pronouns in the subject position of a finite clause and the object position of a transitive verb, as shown in the examples. So the two sentences are both well-formed. So in the first sentence, 小张说喜欢老王. Here there is a null element in the subject position of the embedded clause. 小张说, an empty category, 喜欢小王. And this empty category is co-indexed with either the subject of the matrix clause 小张 or an entity in the discourse, someone else. So there are two interpretations to the sentence. One is that 小张 said that 小张 himself likes 老王. The other is 小张 said that someone else likes 老王. So in the second sentence, 小张说老王喜欢. There is a null element in the object position, 老王喜欢 empty category. And there is a null element in the object position of the embedded clause. It can be co-indexed with the entity in the discourse, but can't be co-indexed with the subject of the matrix clause. So there is only one interpretation. 小张说, 小张 said that 老王喜欢 someone in the discourse, not 小张 himself. So Lucy Zhao proposed two types of null elements in Chinese. One is empty 自己, the other is empty topic. The null element in the embedded subject position can be either an empty 自己 or an empty topic. The empty 自己 refers to the matrix subject, and the empty topic refers to a discourse entity. According to these categories in the sentence 小张说喜欢老王, the empty subject of the embedded clause is either an empty 自己, which refers to the matrix subject 小王, 小张, or an empty topic co-indexed with the entity in the discourse. The null element in the embedded object position can only be an empty topic referring to a discourse entity, but can't be an empty 自己. So in the sentence 小张说老王喜欢, the embedded object is an empty topic referring to an entity in the discourse. So in contrast to noun elements, overt pronouns and the reflexive 自己 can occur in both the embedded subject and object positions. In both positions, the overt pronoun 他 can refer to either the matrix subject or a discourse entity. So the reflexive 自己 can't refer to a discourse entity. It can only refer to the matrix subject. Now let's look at the four sentences. The first is 小张说他喜欢老王. 他 can be 小张 or someone else in the discourse. This is the at the subject position. The second sentence, sentence B, 小张说老王喜欢他. This 他 can be 小张 or someone else. The overt pronoun in the object position. Sentence C, 小张说自己喜欢老王. And here, 自己 can only be 小张, can only refer to 小张, not someone else. And sentence D, 小张说老王喜欢自己. And this 自己 can only be 小张, but not someone else. This is the overt pronoun. So according to Lucy Zhao, empty 自己 belongs to the pure syntax. The interpretation of the overt pronoun 他 involves the syntax semantics internal interface, and the empty topic concerns a syntax discourse external interface. So this study provides a perfect case to test the interface hypothesis. She did an experiment to examine whether overt and null arguments are properly represented and interpreted in Alto Chinese. The question can be broken down into further three specific questions. The first is whether Alto learners can interpret 他 in the embedded argument positions in the same way as native Chinese speakers. And the second question is whether they can acquire empty 自己 as a defective goal. And the third question is whether they can acquire empty topic and represent it as deletion of the topicalized subject, object, and identity with the chain topic of a topic chain. So participants in the experiment include 39 English speakers who are classified into a high intermediate group and an advanced group, and 16 native Chinese form the control group. The three experimental groups differ significantly in their Chinese proficiency, which means that the advanced group are not quite near native learners. So, instruments of the experiment include a written interpretation task and a picture judgment task. Results indicate that Alto learners do not have any problem interpreting 他 correctly, which implies that the syntax semantics interface is acquirable. Alto learners do not have any problem relating the embedded non-subject to the matrix subject, an indication that pure syntax is acquirable. The Alto learners successfully take a discourse entity as the referent of the embedded non-subject at the advanced level, though they fail to do so at the high intermediate level, suggesting that the syntax discourse interface is ultimately acquirable. The result does not support the interface hypothesis, whether in its original version or in the new version. Next is a similar experiment by one of my students. So she replicated Lucy Zhao's experiment on 29 Spanish-speaking learners of Chinese. They were classified into two groups, an intermediate group and an advanced group. The control group consists of 25 native speakers of Chinese. So the three groups differ significantly in their Chinese proficiency. The instrument is an acceptability judgment test. Results show a very clear asymmetry between noun subjects and noun objects in L2 Chinese grammars, most probably due to L1 effect, as Spanish is a pro-job language. If you have the inflection, the verbs have full inflections, then you don't need the subject, right? The pro-job language. So that a noun subject is allowed, but a noun object is not. The syntax-discourse interface in relation to empty topic is more difficult to acquire than the syntax-semantics interface concerning the overt pronoun ta, which lends support to the interface hypothesis. But it is inappropriate to conclude that it is not acquirable in the end, as the developmental tendency is very obvious, developed toward the native-like grammar. Now let's look at another empirical study by Lucy Zhao, which further explores into noun and overt elements in Chinese. Chinese allows noun elements and overt pronouns in the subject position of finite clauses. For instance, they can both appear in the subject position of the main clause and that of the subordinate clause. Look at the two examples. The first one is 张三吃晚饭的时候，他戴了一顶帽子. The second is 他吃晚饭的时候，张三戴了一顶帽子. In sentence A, both the noun element and the overt pronoun 他 can refer to 张三. 张三吃晚饭的时候，他戴了一顶帽子. So 他 can be 张三, can be someone else. So the noun element is a empty topic, noun topic. In sentence B, the noun element can refer to 张三 in the matrix subject position. But the overt pronoun 他 can be can't be used here. 他 can also be used here, but it can't be co-indexed with the matrix subject. So 他吃晚饭的时候，张三戴了一顶帽子。他 cannot be 张三. But when you use the empty category, 吃晚饭的时候，张三戴了一顶帽子, then the empty category can be co-indexed with the subject of the matrix clause. So the contrast between A and B indicates that the overt pronoun 他 can refer to the other sentence subject in forward anaphora, as shown in A, but not in backward anaphora as shown in B. According to Lucy Zhao, interpretation of ta observes the cyclic C command condition within narrow syntax, whereas the interpretation of non-topic or empty topic concerns the syntax discourse interface. So Lucy Zhao did an empirical study to see whether English-speaking learners can acquire the native-like competence in interpreting the overt pronoun ta, and whether English-speaking learners can acquire the noun or empty topic in the argument positions. So 15 English speakers and 14 native Chinese were involved in the experiment, and a proficiency test did not reveal any significant difference between the L2 group and the control group. In other words, the L2 learners are near-native learners. The instruments of the experiment include an acceptability judgment test and a picture judgment test. Results show that the cyclic C command condition within narrow syntax is not acquirable, whereas empty topic or non-topic at the syntax discourse external interface is acquirable. So according to both versions of the interface hypothesis, narrow syntax is acquirable, but external interface can't be acquired. So such a prediction was not borne out in this study. Okay, we've reviewed some studies on L2 acquisition of Chinese interfaces, and here is the very brief summary. So whether narrow syntax is acquirable, yes and no. So the syntax semantics interface, that is the internal interface, whether the internal interfaces are acquirable. Yes, mostly yes, and question mark, right? And whether syntax discourse interfaces are acquirable. Mostly yes, and question. And they do not agree with the interface hypothesis. So can we provide explanation to the divergent findings? I think we might provide some explanations in the 4 aspects. The first is, in all the studies above, L1 plays an important role, either facilitative or obstructive. For example, English-speaking learners acquire the unaccusative distinction very late due to L1 transfer, because in English, the object of unaccusative, the single argument of unaccusative verbs must raise to the subject position. And so in the beginning, they reject all the sentences with the NP following an intransitive verb. So the asymmetry between noun-subject and noun-object in Spanish-speaking learners of Chinese can also be traced to L1 Spanish, which is a pro-drop language. Secondly, pure syntax is claimed to be the easiest to acquire, but it is problematic with regard to the co-referential reading of ta in Lucy Zhao's study. And Lucy Zhao attributed the divergence of L2 grammar to representational deficit in L2 acquisition. And thirdly, we could say processing difficulties are a reason. Functional categories are more difficult to process than lexical categories. And the fourth factor is complexities of certain functional categories, like le, inferential, le, is very difficult to acquire. Okay, now let's come to the third part, which is very, very short, very brief. The relation between L2 Chinese acquisition research and L2 Chinese teaching. So we know that solving problems arising from language teaching is a very important driving force for second language acquisition research. For example, both the error analysis and the interlanguage hypothesis originated from problems in language teaching and aimed at providing explanations and even solutions to language teaching. However, after the 1970s, the relation between acquisition research and the language teaching was not that straightforward as before, with more theoretical frameworks were adopted and more hypotheses were proposed. Thus, there was a kind of separation between research and teaching. So just now, we reviewed the history of Chinese teaching and learning and some studies in L2 Chinese acquisition. Do they seem to be related closely? It seems the research findings of the second language acquisition are meaningless or useless to the teaching, right? Okay. Because we can't use the research findings in interface studies in language teaching. At least we can't apply them directly to language teaching. Then what's the point of second language acquisition research? I have to say that providing solutions to second language teaching is not the only purpose of SLA research. In my view, SLA research has 3 objectives. First, for language teaching, and second, to study the mechanisms of how people acquire a second language, and third, to contribute to general linguistic studies. Of course, generally speaking, we can say all the 3 objectives can contribute to general linguistic studies. So, what a role do L2 Chinese studies play in SLA in general? So in my view, L2 Chinese studies can contribute to the discipline in 2 ways. First, they can verify, modify, or even falsify previous research findings based on other languages, in particular Indo-European languages. For example, in the previous review on L2 Chinese acquisition of interface problems, the interface hypothesis, which was based on Indo-European languages, was challenged. Thus, we need a new proposal to accommodate L2 Chinese acquisition. Second, by comparing the unity and the diversity between findings in L2 Chinese studies and in studies of other languages, it's possible for us to see linguistic properties more clearly and thus formulate new theories. So L2 studies of different languages are individual trees. With more and more trees, we will be able to see the forest. So L2 Chinese acquisition research has just started. I did a very brief survey of articles published in 4 mainstream journals, and here is the result. The 4 journals are studies in second language acquisition, second language research, language learning, and applied linguistics. And from 1996 to 2015, 20 years. So in studies in second language acquisition, in the last 20 years, only 9 articles on L2 Chinese acquisition were published. And in second language research, 15 articles. And in language learning, 7 articles. And applied linguistics, only 2 articles. And we can see that articles on L2 Chinese acquisition constitute a very, very small portion of the total of articles published. Which means that there's L2 Chinese acquisition has a very long way to go. And welcome, you're all welcome to join in this subject, in this discipline, to look into this fascinating area. And let's do it.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhao. Delivered very insightful lectures. I think a number of you are interested in raise some questions. Take this opportunity to ask Professor Zhao. So now is the questions and answer session. Questions? Any questions related to this topic? Okay.
I'm not sure if you would know, but like we're on you have like the chart up there of like the different studies and whether they support the acquisition of like the different interfaces. Do you know how those may correlate to like some of the results in other language acquisition?
Sorry, some.
Like, do you know if like the results in like the acquisition of different things
Okay.
correlate to other?
For example, the interface hypothesis. Very controversial from the results on different on studies of different languages. Some support the hypothesis, some do not support. And I have to say that in second language acquisition, very few hypotheses were generally accepted, supported by all the studies. Very few. And in a sense, we can say that second language acquisition is a very new branch of study. I started 50, 60 years ago. So very few conclusions or findings were supported universally. Thank you.
Question?
In research, when you say first language, do you focus mainly on English, or like you had Spanish studies up there when you were testing for first language, how first language affects second language acquisition? Do you mostly focus on English, or do you focus on other languages too?
Yeah, it depends on what you want to study. For example, in 2005, I published an article on acquisition of Chinese resumptive pronouns by Palestinian Arabic speakers. A very interesting study, and because in Palestinian Arabic, resumptive pronoun is very common. It can occur in different places, but in Chinese, it is very restricted. For example, we can only use resumptive pronoun in the position of a preposition. 昨天我跟她跳舞的那个女孩是美国人。我跟她跳舞。In English, gap is used, or you can't use the girl with her I danced. But in Chinese, resumptive pronoun can be used, but very limited positions, cases. But in the Palestinian Arabic, it's very common. So I use this case to study on acquisition of resumptive pronouns by native English speakers and Palestinian Arabic speakers. It depends on what's your purpose of study. And in another study, I studied topic structure in Alto Chinese grammars. We know Chinese is a topic prominent language, and English is a subject prominent language, and Japanese has two features, both subject prominent and topic prominent. Waga, in Japanese waga, and in Chinese, in spoken Chinese, we have some indicator topic like ya, 这个呀, 那个呀, right? But in written form, we don't have this kind of. And I studied how English speakers and Japanese speakers acquire topic structure in Chinese to see whether the first languages have some impact to their second language grammar. And my conclusion is that not that much influence, because second language learners are usually very conservative. They start from the very core grammar, that is subject predicate, rather than using freely the topic structures. Okay. It depends on your purpose of study. And one of my students studied how the empty categories in Alto Chinese grammars by Spanish-speaking learners. Just now I mentioned in Spanish, Spanish is a pro-job language, while Chinese is a topic prominent, and sometimes we say it's a topic job. And when the Spanish-speaking learners, Chinese, come across this kind of phenomenon, they will have expected that in Chinese probably all the subject could be omitted as in their L1 Spanish. Okay, it's very interesting. It depends on your purpose of study.
Good question. Any other questions?
Professor Zhao, I think interface study is a very interesting one and also a very complicated one. If there is a hierarchy to acquire the language, that should be a very later stage.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I'm really interested how we can use these kind of findings into use in the teaching, like you have already mentioned.
Right, yeah. Good question, right. People hope that findings in second language acquisition could contribute to language teaching. But nowadays, if you read articles, especially in the second language research, the two things are separate. And when people study second language acquisition, I think they're more concerned with the mechanisms rather than how their findings could apply to teaching. But nowadays, in recent years, people start to reflect on this kind of development. And in recent years, there are some books published in application of findings in second language acquisition in teaching. For example, a book by Rod Ellis and another author in 2014. That is the how second language acquisition findings apply to language pedagogy. People start to think about this. Otherwise, all the research findings are useless. They just look into the mechanisms. But we can't say they are totally useless. Like, for example, a lot of theories, you can't see how you could use them currently, right now. Probably at the later stage, people realize, oh, we can apply this in some area, right? Okay. And I think this is probably learning for learning's sake, learning for learning's sake, just to find the mechanisms of second language acquisition.
Okay, any questions from graduate students, particularly in major in second language acquisition program? Any questions?
I have another
Okay.
so
Good.
could you elaborate a little bit the syntax semantics interface with the syntax discourse interface?
Syntax semantics interface, that is a linguistic phenomenon which is semantically determined, but syntactic